Gentlemen,
I don't even know what to say at this point.
I come to you from the virtual realms.
Wow.
I noticed that.
Is that what VR stands for? Realm?
Yeah, virtual
realm?
realms. Yeah, not reality, realms. And much like Universes Beyond, or whatever the heck that stuff's called, I'm coming to you from lands beyond.
Okay.
Lands of virtual lands.
I need to describe this because this is an audio medium, and so visual gags don't work great. But Shane is on camera wearing, what is that? Is that an Oculus? Like, what is that?
It's the Quest 3 Meta Get At Us, sponsor our podcast.
Yeah.
And it has pass-through cameras. So I'm sort of using my computer while the headset's on. I'm going to do this for an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm not going to. This is coming off my head as soon as the intro's over.
Devon, have you ever VR'd?
I have not, but it sounds like a good time. I feel like I should try it out.
I've never VR'd.
No.
Oh, man, your kids would love it, Dave.
I'm not giving my kids any more digital stuff. They got Super Mario Wonder this weekend. Ooh. They can do that for the next 10 years as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so how is Wonder?
It's pretty wonderful. I would say it's not like groundbreaking so far in the Mario realms, but it's nice to have a new side scroller.
Yeah, so it's just like, it's literally like a 2D, right? It's just a side scroller. There's no Odyssey running around the world type stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, that sounds great. Devon, how do you play video games? Are you like a Nintendo man, a Sega man, Xbox man?
Well, I haven't played video games in a long time.
Some would say you play one every day, Devon.
Well, I mean, that doesn't really count.
Yeah.
I had Warzone downloaded on my PC. I haven't played it in a while, but the last console I had was an Xbox. You know the game I used to really jam back in the day was Guitar Hero. I played so much of that as a kid. Oh my god!
As a kid, Devon. Oh my god! I was like 26 when I was playing Guitar Hero.
Hold on. I say as a kid, but when I say as a kid, I mean as an adult as well. Because I still play
the Wii one that everyone likes for the PC.
No, I have it. So it's called Clone Hero, which is kind of like it's a knockoff of sorts, but it's basically like it has the library of all of the old games, but you can also people can custom create their songs, so you can there's a whole library you can search songs. It's awesome.
Devon, so my favorite was Guitar Hero 1 and Rock Band. The other ones, I guess Guitar Hero 2 was pretty good as well. Did you have a favorite of the franchise?
Honestly, I kind of like Metallica.
There's just a Metallica one? I never even did that one. There's one?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, there's one where they didn't have every single song, but they had pretty much, a really good chunk of the library. And then also like Metallica adjacent songs. There was some Merciful Fate. There was some... I'm trying to think of what else, but yeah, that game was great.
Yeah, unbelievable. Those were amazing. I spent so much time playing Guitar Hero when I was in my early 20s because I played music. Like I played in a band in high school. I played in like a punk band, and then I went to college and I stopped playing stuff. And then Guitar Hero came out, and I was playing around a little bit with my friends and like cover music, but then I played so much Guitar Hero that I started playing in another band again where I was like, I'm practiced now. Like, let's go do some stuff. Like it was amazing. Great game.
Yeah, not just Guitar Hero 2. I had like the whole drum set.
Yes.
For Rock Band or whatever.
Devon, I used to pull the ultimate power move with that because we used to go out to the bar and then go home and play Rock Band with like 4 people.
Did you do like the Phil Collins thing? Like, did you drum and sing?
I would drum and sing. Yeah, I would drum and sing at the same time, or guitar and sing at the same time. Just it was like, yeah, frack. It was fun. I remember playing like Siamese or not Siamese Dream. It's Cherub Rock is on Rock Band.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Hello and welcome to episode 246 of The Dive Down, mostly Magic the Gathering podcast, focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike.
Obviously, this is a takeover by Marvel.
My name is Shane, here in Denver, Colorado. With me on the line from Massachusetts, it's Devon O'Donnell, a.k.a. Doomwake.
I was trying to figure out why you put the Z's next to my name. I couldn't tell if that was because you're falling asleep to my stream or...
I am a little tired today. I got my COVID shot for the year on Saturday, and I feel like I just have sort of a little bit of residual sleepy times, or it could just be the fact that I went to work today, which is also a great way to make you tired. Devon, how was your day at the office?
It was good. I got to, play a little bit of Sheoldred in everybody's favorite deck, which we will discuss a little bit later today. But yeah, it's, this weekend was pretty good. I feel like we maybe had a breakthrough with the Rhinos archetype, and just excited to discuss it.
I love hearing about breakthrough in the Rhinos archetype, so more on that later for sure. Also, you may have heard the voice of the one and only Godfather Dave Harbarger.
Sorry, I'm busy trying to 100% Freebird right now. Guitar Hero 1, bringing it back.
What's, Devon, on like the open source Guitar Hero that you were talking about? What is like the big, what's like the known hardest song that everyone's trying to like master for like the biggest internet clout?
Definitely Through the Fire and Flames. You can actually, if you go to YouTube and you search Through the Fire and Flames like expert, I think there's a video. I think it's from like 12 years ago at this point, but I think it has like 40 million views. People love that kind of stuff.
It's
Holy
amazing.
Smokes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was like a really popular like streamer game, right?
It was, yeah.
That band is named after a Magic card, are they not? Is that band? Oh, it's Dragon Force. No, I thought it was called Dragon Storm for a second. No, it's Dragon Force.
Well, that'd be cool.
That would be sick.
My friends, before we get into more on this episode, let's talk about Heavy Play, a newish card gaming accessories brand that will improve your gameplay and your game day. They have play mats, they have deck boxes, they have dice boxes, they have card sleeves, enhanced ergonomics, enhanced mobility, enhanced protection. The cool thing, of course, the Equip Mag system. You magnetically attach your dice and deck boxes to each other. You can attach them to your playmat to carry them around. You can carry all that gaming gear in a single hand. As I mentioned, I recently got to bust my stuff out at my RCQ the other week. It was great. I loved it. We know that Stan and Dave have talked about it as well. We still have to get some in Devon's hand for him to test out. We're at all his like 75 RCQs for the season. But you can find it at your LGS, quite likely, or shop online at heavyplay.com. When you do that, you can use code TheDiveDown2023 for 10% off your first order there. Thank you, Heavy Play. Thank you, all of y'all who have used the code so far.
On this week's show, we got a couple of different things going on. Number one, we're going to talk about, can we find new love or new ideas or new tech in Modern? Devon and I have been playing some stuff in Modern. There's been some interesting stuff happening online with people trying out new things, and we're going to talk about it. And old things. They're trying, new things are old again. Or wait, sorry, old things are new again here in Modern right now. And we're going to call it Classic Modern or Mid-Century Modern, perhaps. But Devon's going to talk a little bit about some time he spent with an interesting twist on Rhinos. I'm going to talk about an interesting twist that I played on Murktide. And then there's other things to talk about if we have time. And then after that, since we are after the Lost Caverns of Ixalan kickoff stream, we are going to talk about some of the cards that were previewed earlier this week. Have a look at them, talk about what we think of them, and kind of go from there. We got a grip of cards to look at. It's not a huge amount. We'll cut and keep depending on how much time we have left, but that's what this episode is.
And some interesting new mechanics to talk about as well.
Yeah. But first, some housekeeping.
We have one new patron this week, and their name is Some Guy, or S Guy, Some G. So thank you, Some Guy, for becoming a citizen of the Dive Down Nation. And we have some new reviews / Spotify comments. Dave, the ones that I saw before this episode were Dominic C., Florian LaPaulo, and Edward W. Were there more that you had not approved through the Dave censors yet?
Now, there are not more that have been unapproved. There were more that I did not approve. I'm not going to lie about that this week.
No,
Everybody, things are starting to get a little wild in the Spotify comments.
And you got to show us those before you delete them.
I'll show them later. I did delete some, actually.
Dive Down After Dark.
It was a little. Some of them were pointed criticisms that we will internalize and think about. Thank you very much.
Whoa.
And others were, they were a little too spicy. But we do have a couple from Dr. Ali E as well. We have FF Freak back again. We have William back again, and also I think Florian. Keep posting. We really appreciate your commenting. I don't think we can read your name every week on the show. It's been 3 weeks in a row, Florian. It might be time to move you to it's time for you to ascend, as they say, perhaps. But really appreciate the engagement on Spotify. It's nice to see everybody out there. Poll that we had on Spotify was, how do you feel about Modern right now? And the options that I put on the poll were hate it, it's fine, it's great, love it. Those are the four options that I had.
So Dave, this is some good survey design.
Oh, is it?
For this particular purpose, because there's no median.
Yes.
It's a 4-point scale. People cannot hedge and just be like in the middle. They have to pick a side.
I did
Although
give
I think
them it's fine.
Is still somewhat positive.
And for what it's worth, It's Fine was the winner. It was 35 people, 45% of the people polled said it's fine. 37% it said it's great. Surprisingly, I guess, to me a little bit, and that's part of the reason I wanted to ask this poll, is that after there was so much hubbub about the no bans last week, only 6 people said that they hated Modern right now of
That's
the people who came and found us. So, that's good. People still pretty engaged. And obviously we're still playing it.
I mean, hate is kind of a strong word, If I had voted in the poll, I would have said it's fine. Like, I don't think it's terrible, but could it be better? Probably. Could it be worse? Certainly. So, yeah, just like it's kind of in that happy medium right now.
Yeah. I'm here for that. All right. And if you would like to participate in these questions and polls, check us out on Spotify if that happens to be where you listen to things. It's just fun getting some engagement over there. I think people are doing it honestly because it's really easy to do on your phone. Just pop in and hit the questions, maybe even easier than it is on iTunes or things like that. If you want to support us, go to patreon.com/the dive down, where as little as $1 a week will get you access to our Discord server. If you'd like to support us without going to Patreon or Spotify, go check out our store at thedivedown.com/store. And then finally, we want to talk about Mana Traders. Manatraders.com is the place where we rent decks on Magic Online, and used it this week. It's still great. And you can use code TheDiveDown23 to get 10% off your first 2 months of Magic card rentals at Mana Traders. Go check them out, manatraders.com.
Gentlemen, so we're talking about these decks first.
Yes, we're going to talk about Modern first. Yeah.
Ooh, yes, I like this because I think there's some spicy stuff going on. Both of you all played some new cool decks, and the ostensible platform here is, can we keep on doing something new in Modern besides playing Scam or playing Cascade Beans or bring Beans to Light or something like that, right?
Always something new.
Yep. How are we living in this new beanie scammy reality? Well, I think that Devon had the most interesting story, so I'm going to ask him to talk about his weekend RCQ first.
Would love to.
Which had quite a story.
All right. So, as we've kind of discussed over the past couple of weeks, I guess I say I haven't really been here, so hi everybody. It's nice to be back. But as we all have been discussing
you're part
over
of the don't worry.
Yeah.
Over the past couple of weeks with the influx of beans, right? And people have kind of sort of adapted over the past week or so, where the black decks, you'll notice they're playing a lot more copies of Orcish Bowmasters and Sheoldred, because the way that the bean deck works is it obviously tries to play multiple copies of Up the Beanstalk into play and get it to a point where once you, if you have the second or third Beanstalk, every removal spell you cast, like Fury or Solitude, you're breaking even on cards, sometimes going up on cards. And the best way to punish that is punish them for drawing those extra cards. So what this all started with was I played a little bit with Temur Rhinos over maybe the last week prior, and I was doing a lot of testing for the RCQ, because initially I was going to play Temur Rhinos. And I don't know if you guys have played that matchup with the team from the Temur Center thing, but I played against the 4-colored Cascade Beans deck maybe 3 or 4 times, and I just kept getting annihilated. The games were not close at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's mostly just due to the fact that once they have the second Beanstalk, it's really not that hard for them to just clean up your first wave of Rhinos and, with a Solitude plus a Fury. And from there, they just go third Beanstalk, Binding, draw 3. And it's just the game spirals out of their control from there.
Yep.
So where this kind of all started from is I was in Aspiring Spikes chat, as one typically does on a Friday Friday afternoon.
Sure.
And we're just kind of talking, and he was playing his beloved Beans deck. Or actually, no, I think he was playing the Mono Black No Coffers deck. And he was kept mentioning how Sheoldred and Bowmaster were some of the best cards against Beans. Well, I jokingly said to him in chat, I just typed in chat, I was like, what if we just put Sheoldred and Rhinos? I was mostly just joking. And he saw my message and he's like, he looked at the camera and he's like, yeah, that sounds really good.
Yeah, I own one Sheoldred, and I have really been thinking, why does any black deck not just want to play more of these? It's like I'm bringing in 2 in so many matchups and from like the typical scam sideboard. And I'm like, well, how do I just play more of this card? Because it is bonkers if you have the time to resolve it and it stays on the battlefield ever.
Right, exactly. And, especially with the massive uptick in 4-color over the past couple of weeks, it's just one of, it's if you have a bad 4-color matchup, then, you need to address that in some way. And I think Sheoldred is one of, if not the best possible ways to do so.
There's some other bits of Sheoldred that are good too, right? Like the fact that it's 5 power, so it dodges Fury unless it's scammed Furied is nice, right? Like that's a good thing. It's got Death Touch, so it can help you with other things too. So it's the draw is a huge part of it, but it's not the only part of it that makes it a reasonable card, even in Modern right now, and even in that matchup specifically, right?
Yeah, and even just against the non-bean decks, the general philosophy of like putting 8 to 10 power in play on turn 3, getting one big attack in, like even if you just get that first attack in and then get your Rhinos cleared later, that one big attack gets your opponent low enough to where the chip damage from Sheoldred just adds up, even if they're not drawing extra cards. Just that one a turn, that's just good enough. As you mentioned, 5 toughness is massive, blocks Rhinos, so it's like really insane in the mirror match. I don't know, you as a Temur player, I know it's pretty difficult to get that card off the field.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm immediately asking questions like, yes, it is a Temur deck with a 2 black 4-drop. How well is that working out? I might be jumping ahead, but...
Well, it's funny you asked that, Shane, because I don't know if you've heard of these things. They're called fetch lands. And you can honestly just kind of do whatever the hell you want with fetch lands.
And triomes.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, so... Now, obviously, you might think I'm insane for splashing a double black card in a Temur deck, but the reality of the fact is the Rhinos deck doesn't have a ton of mana restrictions early in the game, right? So you typically can so you have turn 1 Crashing Footfalls, turn 2 Fire Ice, or Ice, I guess, is kind of your ideal play pattern. But you don't have a lot of doubles as far as cards you're actually hard casting, right? Because like Fury you can pitch, Force you can pitch, Subtlety you can pitch. So your mana's actually not that like stretched thin. So there's 3 total black sources. One is we swapped the Triumph to be a Grixis Triumph, and then I'm playing an Overgrown Tomb and a Watery Grave, and then swap the fetch lands around a little bit. I'm still not 100% sure on the actual like what the fetch land should be. But, you just want to make sure that if you're swapping around the fetch lands, you kind of do that according to what specific shock lands you're playing, because there is some awkwardness where, like, Wooded Foothills can't get Watery Grave, Scalding Tarn can't get Overgrown Tomb, so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of tension there, but the 2 best that I found is Misty and Verdant, because those usually don't miss on any of the shock lands that you're playing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So we talked about the mana. Do you think that this makes you more vulnerable to Blood Moon, or is it not?
Yes.
Really? It does. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's one of the trade-offs for sure, right? Okay.
Yeah. So, with every good thing, there are definitely some downsides. The upsides are, we can list them. We've already kind of talked about how it makes you better in the Beans matchup and all that. And then the downside is, so the mana base, you can support a double black card. The trade-off is you have to shave on basic lands. Because if you're adding a 4th color, you can't afford to play 4 basics. So we've trimmed on the forest, the second forest, and the second island. So we have one of each to respect Blood Moon to a degree, but it is much weaker. And actually, that's one of the matches that I lost in the RCQ was to Murktide playing Blood Moon.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you're like trying almost to like hide your mana base in certain matchups game 1, or at least trying to like hide the fact that you're going to like drop a Sheoldred. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how easy that is to do, because Sheoldred's always a card you're going to be wanting to play if you have it, but like you can, against like scam, be like, well, I don't want them to keep in Blood Moons against me game 2 or game 3. I don't know if you can play like that or not.
It's kind of tough because you typically want to fetch early and use your shock lands later. So like, let's say you have a hand that has 2 fetch lands and say like a Stomping Ground. You're going to have to get 2 black sources with those fetch lands. And you typically want to fetch early rather than fetch later, because you'd rather, fetch the land that you want and not draw that on turn 3 or turn 4. So you typically do want to, like, I always get the Grixis Triumph first. That's, if you're going to fetch a tap land on turn 1, you always start with the Triumph. And once you fetch Grixis Triumph on turn 1 and you cast a Shardless Agent on turn 3 and cascade into Footfalls, your opponent's going to know something's up. But at the end of the day, it's like you just kind of have to accept those trade-offs.
They're going to be like, is this Living End Rhinos? Like, what is this? It's got both. Yeah. Also, this is Devon we're talking about, Shane. This is someone who, I don't know. I mean, what, 20,000 people follow you on Twitter? So like when you put something like this out into the world, a lot of Magic players are going to know this is what's going on.
Yeah,
too.
of course I know exactly what that feels like.
Yeah,
every time I tweet anything, my 21,000 followers are
exactly
all ears.
Yeah.
It's really funny you mentioned the Living End thing, because I actually did play against Scam today, and they boarded it. Like, I didn't show them Rhinos game 1, and they boarded in Leyline of the Void.
Did they really?
Yeah.
And you're just laughing because you're
so
like,
good.
This is nothing to me. Yeah. Thanks for mulling. Exactly.
The next thing I want to talk about is just before we get to the actual tournament itself, as far as what got cut to make room for Sheoldreds, because we're adding 4 cards. Let's talk about what changed. So as far as the stock Rhinos list are concerned, the way that I look at it, and maybe you guys have differing opinions on this, I think there's 32 slots that are locked in. So those would be the 8 Cascade spells, the 4 Footfalls, that's 12, Force is 16, Dead God is 20, Lorien is 24. What am I missing? Fire Ice is 28, and then there's one more. There's one more card that I keep forgetting. I think I may have said Lorien. But basically, there's 32 flex spots, or 32 locked in spots.
Locked in, yeah.
And then the rest, like the last 6 to 7, depending on whether you want to play 22 or 21 lands, those are kind of what are considered the flex spots. Now, most of the time, at least the list that I've seen online recently, usually have about 3 copies of Subtlety within those flex spots. So if you count that, that's 35 locked in. And then the last 3 to 4 remaining spots, that's where we fit the Sheoldreds in. So these typically consist of Flame of Anor, Main Deck Mystical Dispute, Fury, Subtlety, Questing Beast, Brazen Borrower, and Murktide. Most of all of those got trimmed in some fashion, and that's where we're shaving to make room for copies of those Sheoldreds.
Got it. The list that you ended up playing, no Flames of Anor, right?
Yes. Yep.
Which you probably wouldn't play because you can't really fit Mutavault in this list anyway, right? So that's like way too far. And then not Questing Beast because you have another 4 drop anyway that you're doing. Did you play with some Subtlety in your list? I don't remember seeing that on the list that you had posted. Did you go with some Subtlety?
I did. I had 3. Let me pull up the
you did
list
have 3.
real quick. Yeah,
and I thought that you had 1 Murktide in your list still, or am I making that up?
I did. So in the RCQ, I had 1 copy of Murktide Regent. So yeah, so what were the 32? So it was Shardless, Outburst, Footfalls, Lorien Force, Fire Ice, Dead Gone. That's 28. I was counting the Sheoldreds in that 32. So that was 32. And then the 3 Subtleties, 35, and then the last 4 flex spots were a Murktide, a Fury, a Dispute. Those were all one of's main deck. And then instead of playing the 39th card, because typically people play 21 lands, I went to 22 because I wanted to make room. Like I tried to figure out the mana base without a Boseiju, and then I was able to get the numbers right without the Boseiju, but I'm like, I think I'd rather have the main deck Boseiju than one random second Dispute or second Fury. So I went with a Boseiju over that last spell.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
right.
And then the Questing Beast got moved to the sideboard. Just to kind of go over the sideboard real quick, it was 3 Charmaw, 3 Endurance, 3 Force of Vigor, and then I had 2 more Mystical Disputes, a second copy of Fury, the 4th Subtlety, and then 1 Questing Beast and 1 Commandeer.
3 Charmaw. That's a commitment. You're feeling Charmaw right now?
So there's 2 things about Charmaw. One, as we kind of talked about, as we alluded to, you can't really play Blood Moon because you're adding the 4th color in. Like you're making your deck weaker to Blood Moon, so you're not going to want to board in Blood Moon against other decks. So you can't really afford to play Blood Moon. And to be honest with you, I don't know how you guys feel about this. I think Charmaw is better than Blood Moon against Tron. Is that crazy?
I haven't taken a shot at this yet, but I'm very curious to hear why you think that.
And I've had no chance to cast Charmaw or play against Tron in forever.
Gotcha. Okay. So the reason I think that is typically with like there you can run into some issues with Blood Moon against Tron, especially the way that the Tron decks are built now. They have a lot more insulation against Blood Moon. They have the talismans, they have a lot more Besejus. So and specifically they have 4 copies of the One Ring. Well, I guess 3 and then the Karn to get the other one. But specifically the One Ring makes Blood Moon a really risky proposition because if you don't pressure them and you tap out for Blood Moon on 3 and they just go land One Ring, most of the time you are at a disadvantage in those games because the ring is just going to let them hit their land drops even if they can't answer the Blood Moon. So what Charbot does, it does 2 things. One, it specifically removes the land from the battlefield so that even if they go turn 2 Talisman, they can't play turn 3 Ring because you've just removed the land out of the equation. And the other thing, it also pressures them. So if they have Ring, the Charmot gives them less time to dig out of that. Mm-hmm. So that's the theory behind it.
It's a threat plus mana disruption at the same time, as opposed to being a 1 card dedicated just to mana disruption.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a bigger swing. And it also clocks them at the same time. So you don't need like the redundant piece where it's like disruption plus a clock. You get disruption and a clock.
Right. So, all right. So you've theory crafted this deck, but the tweet that I saw from you, which made me go, what is Devon doing? You were like, I'm going in with no games to my RCQ with this. Is that, so that's what happened, right?
Well, technically not because I played it at FNM. I like threw it together right before FNM and which I went 3-0-1 at FNM, by the way. So, you know, humble brags, I guess.
Yeah, they were feel comfortable trying this on Saturday, in other words, a little bit.
That was the extent of my RCQ prep, but mostly just winning cold.
So Saturday morning comes, you've got this new tech, you've thought about, really gone through the process of thinking about how do you really, like, you don't just take a new card and jam it into your deck. Like, you've really thought about, like, what is this going to do to the deck? Changes the mana, changes the cards that I get to use in the flex spot. You're ready to go. How did the event go?
So ultimately, I was able to make it all the way to the finals. Unfortunately, I did lose in the finals. It was a 1-slot event, so I feel like we've maybe been here a little bit before. We talked about this last season, and it's funny. The person who I lost in the finals was the same person that I lost to in the finals of the RSQ last season. So he's got my number. So as far as the matchups are concerned, round 1, Murktide, win, loss. I did lost in 3. That was the game where, they didn't show me Blood Moon in the first 2 games, so I didn't know whether or not I should be fetching around it. Decided not to fetch around it and got Blood Moon. So that was round 1. Round 2, Scam 2-0. Sheoldred was fantastic against them. I was able to cast it. And that's kind of the thing. It's like they have to answer, specifically Scam, they have to answer your first wave of Rhinos. And typically Scam is, you probably know this, Dave. You play a lot of Scam. They're not the best unless they have Fury Scam. Like they have to, push plus terminate, and that's 2 removal spells gone. You follow that up with a Sheoldred. It's like, what are they supposed to do about that?
Right. Yeah, you've already used all your bullets to get rid of the trampling rhinos, and now you have this thing that's going to kill you whether it attacks or not.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Tron was able to win in 3. That match, specifically Sheoldred, was insane because there was, the way that game played out is I played a Cascade spell on 3, attacked them for a large amount of damage, and then they tried to play Ring I think they went like Ring to stabilize into O-Stone, but I was able to rip Sheoldred and cast it when they were at like 10 life with a Ring in play, and the Ring was already on 2, so they just couldn't activate their Ring basically, or else they would die on the spot. So Sheoldred basically just soloed them. It was amazing. Round 4, play against Coffers, 2-0 them. Sheoldred, I don't remember. I think I might have cast it, but it just kind of did the Rhinos thing. That matchup is, I think, very, very good for Rhinos because Force Negation is just so good against the deck that has all 4 drops. Round 5, took an intentional draw because it was only 5 rounds. And then quarterfinals, played against Temur Rhinos. Just, again, Sheoldred, massive. It's just blocking 4/4 Rhinos. They really couldn't do a ton about it. Semifinals, Coffers, that was a rematch. Ended up winning that 2-0. And then in the finals, the deck that we designed the deck to beat, unfortunately, was still not able to defeat the Cascade Beans deck. Lost 2-0. Had some, unfortunate draws, but that's Magic. It is what it is. But it's just kind of funny that, I built the deck to beat the Beans deck, and then the Beans deck is the one that ultimately took me out in the finals.
Yeah, you got the matchup you were kind of hoping for in the finals, right? And then you got the variance caught you though, because I know that you said you never played a third land in game 1, and then game 2 you had to mull to 5, and so it was just really hard dig out of, right?
Yeah, I was in the play game 1. I kept a 2-lander with ice, which typically you guys have been there before. You always keep the 2-landers with the ice and the cascade spells. Never drew land 3, and then game 2 I multi 5. So.
Ugh. So I gotta ask, when you're going through these rounds, what were people saying when they were playing you? Were they just like, what the heckin'? Or like, is it a small enough room where everyone was like, okay, Doom's on this wild Cascade deck that has Sheoldred type
it was a
thing,
relatively small room, so once we get to like around 2 or 3, people kind of knew what was going on. Like my Scam opponent was kind of surprised when I cast it. My Tron opponent was relatively surprised when I cast it, but then past that, everybody knew what was going on because people were kind of watching how it is in the smaller CQs. You just kind of watch the other matches going on.
Yeah, stuff clears. If people start dropping, you watch what's going on.
Yeah, so once we got the top 8, everybody kind of knew what was up. But yeah, it was just like I was just blown away at how unbelievably good Sheoldred was, even outside of the Beams matchup. Just like being able to like block against Rhinos, very, very good against the Ring decks, because I did play against Coffers twice and Tron, which, definitely comes up against Ring. Yeah, I was just like, it was crazy to me that I thought it was really only going to be there for the Beams matchup, but it turns out that the card's just really good.
Yeah, like, is this the kind of card that we've just been sleeping on a little bit, where it's like, okay, this thing costs 4 mana, it's in heavy black, and it's not necessarily a deck that Scam has room for main deck, and like everyone else is like forgetting about it. I guess it's in the Dimir control deck a little bit, right?
Yeah, it was a 2 of when I tried it in that particular list, but Dimir mid-range. When Devon's on the show, we call it Dimir mid-range.
Oh yes, that's correct. Dimir aggro.
Temur Tempo.
Yeah. But do you, I mean, yeah, maybe more people should be playing Sheoldred just main, depending on the matchup. Although, Rhinos is in the particular kind of special spot, I think, where it has space for a 4-drop threat that it wants number one, because you can't cascade into it. And number 2, you have a pretty like reasonably aggressive, assertive kind of early game plan already, but a really open-ended second half plan is kind of open to your deck. So being able to add Sheoldred in there is an interesting dimension, because it just kind of fits right on curve with something you can easily swap in. It's kind of how I think about it after you're talking about it too.
Yeah, and the other really, really important thing, especially in the post-board games, when you've noticed this a lot, people bring in Chalice the Void, Engineered Explosives, they bring in I had some people bring in Stonebrain against me. I have a funny screenshot on Twitter where there's a Stonebrain naming Crashing Footfalls as I have a Sheoldred in play. So,
right.
People just like, that's kind of what happens against Cascade. They just assume that the deck is so one-dimensional, where they just board in, they sideboard, overcompensate, and they typically will mulligan very aggressively to their sideboard cards. And, we've had stuff like this in the past where you play like a Murktide here or there, sometimes main deck Endurance, but none of these cards can solo a game in the same way that Sheoldred can. It literally can just carry the entire game by itself, even if nothing else is going right for you, which is it's just crazy to me how messed up it is.
Yeah.
Not a lot of 4 mana cards, besides maybe some Planeswalkers, can close the game by themselves without doing anything but sticking on the board, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe some like ley lines. Like, I'm just trying to think of like what wins you the game. And I don't know. I can't think of anything.
The One Ring. Perhaps.
I mean, it has to do something. You have to be able to tap with it. Like, what can someone do to stop your triggered abilities? I mean, I'm sure there's some sideboard card I don't know about, right? That would like stop Sheoldred's triggered abilities from the draw, but
I don't even know.
Who's playing those?
Yeah, maybe we don't need to worry about it right now.
One last thing to note, as far as the mana base is concerned, for people who want to maybe play this, people at home listening that want to try this out themselves, the mana base is a work in progress. I played for like 7 hours today on stream today, trying to get the mana base down, because I do think I'm going to play this in the Modern Super League this week.
Awesome.
But the mana base is tough. Still not sure about the final numbers, but I believe the conclusion we've come to is that Misty and Verdant are the 2 best fetches, because those miss the least amount. And then what you kind of want to do is like figure out what the best fetches are and then build the mana base upon that. You don't want to start with the shocklands. You want to start with the ones that fetch the shocklands. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, I think, last final note, deck's great, Sheoldred's awesome, and I'm definitely going to keep playing it moving forward.
Can I ask, so between the FNM and like playing it today, did you run into Beans some? Like, did you have some matchups where you got to test your hypothesis about this deck actually being, Sheoldred being enough to close the gap against Beans? Or what do you think about that particular matchup at this point?
So I played against it once at the RCQ, didn't play it against it at FNM, and weirdly, I think out of 4 leagues, I only played against it twice today. And
Okay.
I expected to play against it a lot more than that. I did win both of those matches on stream today, so I am, I guess 2-1 against it, so a very small sample size.
Yeah.
But I mean, Sheoldred just does so much work in that matchup.
Yeah, you felt like it's
crazy.
working. That's mostly what I wanted to
100%.
check on, like anecdotally. Yeah.
I gotta ask, Doom, what were you playing today on stream? Because I believe it involved Cascade Rhinos, and I saw a Grief in there.
Yeah, that one's still in the works. Okay, we're not gonna spend
Spoilers.
that one is the idea there is you basically just cut a lot of the red cards and just add Grief and a bunch of terrible black split cards that can facilitate Grief and Force Negation. I don't know, needs a little bit of work, but Grief is pretty cool as like a free way to take their counterspell before you set up for a turn 3 Cascade.
Or like the Living End type thing.
I was going to say that's what Living End thinks. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that one needs a little bit more work though.
Sweet. That sounds cool. I mean, that is wild. I'm going to have to play with that because I love Rhinos and I love Sheoldred. So let's
Slap them together.
slap it together on the old Magic Online using Mana Traders.
It's a delicious peanut butter and ham sandwich right there from the look of it, but it works. It really works.
Is Sheoldred the ham?
Yeah,
Okay.
gotta be, right?
Yeah, gotta be.
Well, we've got past Devon's Sweet Brew. That is now a real thing. I'm calling it now. Everyone's going to be playing it at your next modern event. But David, you were also testing some new tech that you saw on the internet as well. What were you playing?
So I was looking around this weekend, Saturday morning, trying to find something to do, figure out what we want to talk about this episode, when Dive Down Discord stalwart Kilgore posted a deck list from one of my favorite Twitter follows, Andrea Mengucci. Now, you've met Andrea before, right, Devon?
I have. Yeah, I have. We tested for a Pro Tour together. It was he's awesome.
It seems
Great
like
guy.
an awesome guy. I love, I follow him for the Magic content. I've stayed for the Life of Mengucci content. So I'm always very like, food looks great. Like, looks like he's always enjoying himself. It's awesome. This list, as everybody knows, so Andrea plays a lot of Murktide. Still, I'm not sure if I guess maybe it feels like it's his favorite deck. He plays it, I think, every Friday on his stream or something like that. He seems to play it a lot. But he had posted after he started out 5-2 at the most recent Legacy Championship Series in Europe. There was another modern event that they had over the weekend. I believe he started 5-2 day 1, and then after that he posted the list that he was doing because he had gotten a 5-0 the day before or a couple of days before that he had recorded but not Twitch streamed, I believe, for a Temur Tempo deck. Temur Tempo.
Okay.
And here's what's in the deck. 4 Questing Druids, 2 Tarmogoyfs, and then I realized about halfway through the league, and I don't know why I didn't realize this right away, but the rest of the deck is just Murktide. Okay, everything else that's in the deck is Murktide. It's 4 Baubles, 4 Preordain, 2 Spell Pierce, 2 Spell Snare, 4 Dragon's Rage Channeler, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Ragavan, 4 Unholy Heat, 4 EIs, and then you've got your 3 counter spells and a Brazen Borrower main. It's Murktide with no Murktide. It's just got Questing Druid instead.
So this is like Temur Twin days.
I
Play
mean-
your Is a deck and
No
add
twin,
some
though.
green.
No twin. Yeah. No, this is more like, I mean, the thing that's interesting to me about this, or the thing that first off, Andrea's content's great. I enjoy his decks all the time. The thing that I was excited about was I wanted to play some more woe cards, right? And so I saw this and I was like, oh yeah, Questing Druid is a card that people are pretty interested in. I think people are trying it in Legacy in their Delver decks, even Devon. I know you've been playing a little Legacy. Is that right? Are people trying it in like a Temur Tempo kind of list there as well?
Temur Delver, yeah, similar concept to what's going on here.
Yeah. And so if you guys don't remember Questing Druid, what it is it's a 1/1 for a generic and a green that it's an adventure. So the actual card side is Questing Druid, and it's, like I said, it's a 1/1. It gets a counter anytime you cast a spell that is not green, 1/1 counter.
Oh, I see what we're doing here.
And it has an adventure side that is a generic and a red that basically is Reckless Impulse, but it's at instant speed, and it goes only until your next end step. So it's a Reckless Impulse at instant speed that you are extremely motivated to cast as an instant and not cast as a main phase as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, through my experiences playing that card in Pioneer, I learned that the hard way. Like every time I played it a lot with like P and P shells and various stuff like that. And yeah, if you have a lot of like, 2-drops in your deck that you don't want to hit, especially counterspell too, but it's kind of cool because you can like, if you have 4 mana, you can, if they play a spell, you can questing Druid in response and hit the counterspell off of it. That sounds kind of hot.
Yes. Yeah. And yes, I have done this and hit the removal spell against Scam as well. Hit Unholy Heat off of it when I'm trying to kill something. It was pretty good because guess what? They can't scam cards that you've exiled. That are off the top of your deck. Andrea tweaked the list a little bit between the video that he created and the event that he played over the weekend. So he ended up taking out Tarmogoyf and pulling in and taking out 1 Lightning Bolt and playing a single Ledger Shredder, a single Bone Crusher Giant, and a single Fury main in those slots instead. So you have more utility, maybe more of a pivot threat that can get really big in Ledger Shredder, something that helps you dig through your deck. That's kind of like flavor to taste stuff. I will say, playing through this list, Tarmogoyf was a non-issue the entire time. I thought it was going to be great, that it would block some Furies, scammed Furies here and there, and like it just never came up. I killed people with other stuff almost every time.
Is that an annul in the sideboard?
So Andrea in his paper event has a null in the sideboard.
Like this.
Okay.
Yeah. Does have a null in the sideboard and has a Back to Nature in the sideboard that he later said on Twitter he would switch to an annul as well. So he was thinking about, after the event, he's like, I'm going to run 2 annuls in the sideboard. Annul's a pretty good card.
Is that like a single blue artifact enchantment thing? Like, what does that do again?
It is counter target artifact or enchantment spell for a single blue. That's right.
Hey, I was there.
Yeah,
I knew
blue
a blue
naturalize.
spell.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, extra stuff against Beanstalk, right?
Yeah, and specifically 1 mana, because you really need to try and get under the Beanstalks, and especially when you're like curving out with Ragavans and Darcys and stuff, you want to be able to use your mana as efficiently as possible. And the other thing about Annul is it doesn't let them get the card back, right? With something like Back to Nature, even if you kill 2 beans with it, they've already replaced themselves. And Annul is a way to trade that down on mana efficiency, and they don't get their card out of it.
Yeah, I think it's great. And actually, when I played this league, so I played a league with the deck. I played against Scam, Burn, Scam, Eldrazi Taxes, Scam, basically, and Beans were the five lists that I played against. I went 2 and 3, but I love this deck a lot more, and I would definitely take it out for another spin, and let me tell you why. So first things first, I think that this is a list as well, like the similar way to you were thinking, Devon, where you're like, let me start with a deck that's good against Scam and try to make it good against Beans as well, and feel like I can kind of like close the gap with that matchup. I believe that that's exactly what Andrea is trying to do here, which is, Murktide is okay against both of these decks, I think. Probably struggles a little more with Bean than it does with Scam because of some of the cheap counter spells that are already there and the red removal that's already there against Scam. But by switching to questing Druid, you really just get this. It's not so much about the Druid side as it is about shoving another 2-for-1 in your deck, honestly. And I think that that's kind of what this does, is because you suddenly essentially have 8. I don't want to say you have 8 expressive iterations, but that's kind of the idea here, right? Let's say you have 8 divinations, essentially, that are at the right casting cost for you. They're at the right spot in the curve for you, and one of them turns into a threat that can get not as big as Murktide, but big enough to cause damage. And so I kind of got the matchups that I wanted to in this league to be able to play it against Scam and Beans. And
that's always nice. You're like not playing its random stuff. You're like, oh, I need to test for this episode. Hopefully I play against the real decks.
Right. So I'll go quickly through these matchups. So the thing that really won me over to this deck and made me feel like any of the losses I had after it were my fault and not the deck's fault was the round 1 game I had against Scam. And it just felt like I always had every answer to what they were doing. And they grief scanned me 2 of the 3 games that we played on turn 1. And I still managed to come back through having lots of 1 CMC answers to things. One of the times they were on the play, one of the times they were on the draw. So one time I didn't get to interact with being grief scanned. The other time I did have the double removal, or like the spell plus removal, to be able to kill the creature when they tried to use the Undying Scam card on it, basically. Druid got big. I got to do some like tricky combat stuff with Druid where people were attacking Bowmasters into my 1/1 Druid, thinking that I was going to have to trade. And then I was like, well, I'm going to do this stuff at instant speed and make it bigger and like kill your Orc, block your Bowmaster. So there was a little bit of like, hey, that probably saved me a card or 2 in that game, which was just, it's like a bad attack from someone. But still, it was nice to be able to interact in a way that felt a little prowessy. it's like I really love decks like this. I love Prowess. I love Death Shadow, honestly, and it kind of felt like this is a little bit in that same zone. It's just like what threat is appropriate for the metagame right now. And it's possible that it's Druid because it's also a draw spell.
Yeah, and the other one thing that, we didn't mention is that there are no copies of Murktide in this deck. And a lot of people might think that's kind of crazy, but the reality is you mentioned that you want to make your deck better against beans. Murktide lines up really poorly against 4 Solitude, 4 Leyline Binding. And having your extra threat not only be in a cheaper card, but also in the form of card advantage just seems like a really good place to be.
Yeah, I was surprised at Druid, and this is the one match where Druid got up to be like a 5/5 or a 6/6 really fast, and I killed them with it. The one thing that really was big was game 3. My hand was 1 fetch, 2 DRCs, 1 Ragavan, a Bolt, a Heat, and a Goyf. And they thought seized me, and they took Tarmogoyf for some reason, which I'm not quite sure, which just told me, hey, they don't have Grief Scam, right, in their hand. They're not coming back with it.
Yeah.
Then they drew into it. Turn 2, I have to assume they drew into Grief Scam. They Grief Scammed me. Then I killed it and went even with the exchange. So I think that was maybe I got Grief Scammed in all 3 games. Twice on turn 1, once on turn 2, and managed to win. And then, DRC, I love Dragon's Rage Channeler. It's such a complicated card right now because of Bowmasters being out in the meta so much that you have to be really kind of precious with how you play it. But this deck does a great job of filling up the graveyard and keeping Delirium. And that's another thing that helps to not have Murktide, is that not having to cannibalize your graveyard to be able to cast Murktide in order to make a big threat. You know that your Unholy Heats and your Deathrite Shaman, or your Deathrite Dragon's Rage Channel. I always call the card Deathrite Shaman. I always
you're giving me nightmares.
Yeah, sorry, not Deathrite Shaman.
Just dreaming.
It's DRS versus DRC. Your Channeler is going to stay a 3/3 basically, unless someone brings in Graveyard Hate against you, which I don't think is great in this one. But this was just like, it felt like all the pieces coming together, clicking, moments click together like magnets, all of that kind of stuff. It just felt like I had it against Scam. I was like, okay, I'm 1 game into this. This is the best deck ever. I'm 1 match into this league. It's going to be great. Okay. I immediately start to see some of the Achilles heels with this deck. So round 2, I played against Burn. And let's face it, the biggest problem with a Temur aggro deck like this is going to be that you're going to be out aggroed by another aggro deck that doesn't take as much damage from its mana base, basically. And that's really what happened here, is that when I have to open with 2 fetch lands where I want to fetch shock into an Unholy Heat to kill a Goblin Guide, it's like their Goblin Guide did the damage anyway. And as long as I didn't draw a land off of it, then I'd really come out behind that exchange still. And so, Searing Blaze is very good against you in this matchup because you have a lot of small creatures and yada, yada, yada. And maybe I was too aggro. Maybe I should have never played an untapped shock, but, it's tough. Why bother not bringing your shock in untapped if someone's hitting you with a Goblin Guide? You might as well kill it. You're just going to kill it the next turn anyway, right? So I don't know.
Can confirm, adding an extra color to your deck does make your Burn match worse. Speaking from the person who just added a color to his deck.
Yeah,
and played against Burn a couple times.
Yeah. So round 3, I also lost against Scam. Unfortunately, this was a little more frustrating. I think that I had some bad mulls and stuff like that. I'm not going to belabor this too long from here. I beat the Eldrazi Taxes deck. this was pretty interesting combat kind of trick, kind of math going around, trying to be tricky with getting the most out of your cards, getting the, having the right removal at the right time, using Cast into Flame or whatever to get rid of their Cauldron Complete and stuff like that was how it all lined up. And then Beans, I was playing against straight up control Beans, and it that was tough. It actually kind of felt like maybe this deck didn't have what it takes to win against the more control-minded versions of this deck. This one had Counterspell, and it didn't have the Cascade cards. It just had Counterspell. It was just drawing naturally into Beans, and so it really only needed 1 or 2 Beans to really kind of take me out here. So my takeaway from this deck, I liked it. I think it has potential. I feel like it's not quite good enough against Beans, but maybe the Annuls and the other utility cards that Andrea played instead of Tarmogoyf when he played in paper actually helped that matchup a little bit. I did wonder a little bit, is it crazy to want to bring in Engineered Explosives against Beanstalk? But I guess given what you just said, even if it gets more than 1 bean, they've already drawn the cards off it. So why bother trying to kill it then, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a good plan. The only the cards that you want against Bean are specific, like from the blue side of things. You want to try and fight them on the stack, because once they get that card out of it, like it also kind of just like spirals out of control too. If you don't, so let's say you have explosives and you're like, okay, I'm going to let this first Bean resolve with the intention of explosivesing 2 of them, but then you just put yourself in a spot where they have the second one, and then they also convert the second one into an additional card because they follow it up with a binding, and all of a sudden you've held off on this explosives and you've given them 3 or more cards or whatever. So it's just not a good plan, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think Andre actually agreed as well in another sense. So another difference between the Magic Online list that I played and the list that he actually played in paper, he had 2 Flusterstorm in the list that I played, and he swapped that for 2 more Spell Pierce, which, Flusterstorm has its uses, and I definitely used it to good advantage a couple of times, but having 2 more Spell Pierces, so I could have gone up to 4 Spell Pierces for just more main deck Bean answers. I have a couple of Spell Snare, and then you kind of have your counter spells, you kind of go from there, but and then Annul also. So if he was, he was probably boarding in 2 or 3 more cards than I had access to when I was playing this list against Beans as well, just to try to shore up that matchup.
Yeah, a lot of 1-mana counter spells in the sideboard for that matchup. So I guess he goes up to what? You said 4. So in the list he played in the LMS, it was 4 Pierce, 2 Annul postboard. That's a lot. 4
Pierce, 2 Annul, and 2 Spell Snare that I'm sure he's keeping in as well.
Oh, that's true too. 8 of them is insane.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, wow. It's really, really insane. I do not want that card to come into play.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
I think the best way to fight it.
Yeah, and I think the deck is a little. So that's kind of like, that was the last thing that I was thinking about when I was leaving the league, was like, what else should I brought against Beans? Turns out it's more Spell Pierces. So I do think the deck is a little better and maybe even a little bit more fun because of Druid, honestly, than regular Murktide. You have 8 cards that are 2-for-1s. You have Preordained, so that's 12 cards. I did take, for example, I took Preordain and I took Preordain out against Bowmasters, actually. Do you think that's crazy to do?
No, it makes sense, honestly, because like you get to these spots where if you have, say, like a questing Druid and even it's a 2/2, you like follow it up with a Preordain, they can, it kind of makes sense.
I even took Bauble out in that matchup, honestly. I sideboarded 8 cards out because I was like, I do not want to get any extra Bowmaster triggers. Seemed to work okay. I like Seek the Beast. I think it makes sense in a deck like this, even if it doesn't make sense in other decks where you're trying to like storm off or like do a bunch of spells in a single turn. I don't think Seek the Beast is like a good part of that kind of chain, but as hand insurance, as 2-for-1s, as something that you want to do when you want to keep up other kinds of interaction like this, I think that's the spot that it makes sense. The biggest problems with the deck, we talked about it, so I'm just closing it out here right now. It's mana. It's, you're going to get hurt against other aggro decks if you have to fetch shock a whole bunch. You are playing Murktide basically, so if you really feel like you don't like this kind of style deck, you are still playing Murktide, and you don't have a giant closer in the air. So you do have to be a little bit trickier with when you take your shot on trying to close out the game, because you're not going to hit somebody for 8 flying. That's hard to answer. You are going to be like on the ground doing what you're doing, unless you get your Dragon's Rage Channelers up, but that's a whole other thing. And then the last thing is just keep in mind that this kind of deck, it looks like it's full of lots of cheap spells, but also decks like this are very mana hungry. And so with EI in particular, you can often have these things where it's like, well, I'm off to kind of like a stuttery start opening, and you EI into a Preordain and a questing Druid, and you're kind of like, well, I just EI'd into more card draw. I didn't EI into interaction. I didn't EI into another threat, really. So you can get these moments where it's like, wow, it's just too many cantrips, basically. But I would definitely keep playing this deck. It was fun and interesting to kind of pilot.
One thing that's kind of funny, and I just realized this. So both the decks that we kind of displayed here, we're both adding a color to an already existing deck, and both of us have decided to cut Blood Moon. So I'm curious, I wonder if the cutting Blood Moons from Murktide, if that affects negatively any of the matchups enough to warrant the green cards not being worth it. What do you think about that?
I think it's very possible. I think the problem is that, we talked about what do you think about Blood Moon versus Beans?
Man, it's kind of tough. Like from the Temur side of things, when I was playing Temur Rhinos, but I still have Blood Moons in my sideboard, I brought them in, but like it felt that if their draw lined up in such a way that they had the ability to fetch basics early, it didn't do anything. Now,
Yeah.
that being said, they don't always have the luxury of fetching those basics early. Like sometimes their hand is like one fetch land, a shock land, and a leyline binding, and they just have to get the triome to match with the other shock land for binding, and they don't have the luxury of fetching a basic early. And in those games, Blood Moon is awesome.
Yeah.
But when they can go fetch, 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 and their hand lines up that way, it's like it can be kind of sketchy.
Yeah. I think that my thought was kind of like, I'm not sure if they get an Up the Beanstalk out and they're just pitching cards to interact with me a lot anyway, like maybe they don't even care. Maybe they don't even care, and they're just going to draw into something as well. So, I mean, the conventional wisdom, I think, was kind of like Blood Moon is worse against 4-color than you think it is.
Yep.
You know, it's better against other decks than that, but not that one. Even though it seems like the mana would be fragile, it's maybe a little less fragile than it looks. And so I kind of think that's the shot that Andrea was taking here, and that you kind of took as well. Like de facto is like, I have to attack these two decks that are probably at the top of the meta right now in a different way. And we're really, one of them is, okay, obviously Scam plays Blood Moon, so we're making our decks a little more vulnerable to it by doing this. But at the same time, like Beans is so outrageous right now that I can understand making the sacrifice.
Yeah, that's kind of the exact conclusion that I came to. I'm just like, we got to fight these Beans decks on a different axis. We're the good guys over here, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's what we're trying to figure out. Who's the next good guy? So I don't know. Maybe it's one of these two decks. Maybe, obviously people Devon went to the finals. I might have gotten a 2-through in a league, but an actual good player took it all the way to 21st place at the event. Like Andrea came in 21st at the event he was playing in out of, probably 300 people. Those European events are 300 or 400 people. So just some stuff to think about, especially with
be one of the best players in the world.
Yeah. Especially with shells that exist that maybe people feel like aren't good in the meta. Like we're adding these extra plans onto them to like help.
Now, what happens if we take this lovely Temur Tempo or Murktideless Murktide deck? What if we just add Sheoldred to it?
Everything's better.
I actually do have a list for you there. Now, I do want to talk about one last list that I didn't get to play, but I was curious what you thought about, Devon. I don't know if you saw it, that I stuck this at the end of the notes, but I noticed it. This is what Spiderspace, Gabe Maxon played in a challenge this weekend. It's almost close to what you said, which is like, what if we played Murktide but Sheoldred? Except it's really, what if we played blue-black control / tempo / mid-range, whatever we want to call that, but added Ragavan and Lightning Bolt to it.
Looks all right, honestly.
Was kind of cool. I think that he came in 9th in the challenge that he played with this, and I had a little bit of affinity for the mopey blue-black deck, but having, I love Lightning Bolt, love Counterspell, love Ragavan, like let's go.
Yeah, so this seems like a really good recipe against Beans, because you have the cheap counter magic in the form of Spell Pierce. You have Ragavan, which, to be completely honest with you, they're not the best equipped at dealing with it, because they can't play the Cascade versions can't play Bolt or Pending. So the only thing they have is like they have to pitch cast a Solitude or a Fury on turn 1, which you're pretty happy with, and then couple that with the Bowmasters and the Sheoldreds, Force Negation 2. Yeah, this seems like a good recipe against the Beans decks.
So I don't know. This is kind of like next on my list to check out or like keep an eye on. But this is another one where it's like, Murderous Cut's coming out big and Modern in the last couple of weeks. I've seen a bunch of people trying it out. Some of the Beans decks I think even have Murderous Cut, right? Or is it Beans, or it's another deck where I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, it's the Bean deck.
But yeah,
what
they're going for it.
I played one in a version of my Rhinos today too.
Oh, that's what I saw. You had one. Yeah, that's right, with the Griefs. Yeah. Yeah. So there's stuff going on.
If you need to terminate, but you don't want to go hard into red-black, then there you go.
All right. Well, thanks for going on this tour of a couple of rogue-ish modern decks with us. Next up, we're going to talk about the first cards that we've got to see, or the second group of cards, I guess, that we've gotten to see from Lost Caves of Ixalan. Stay with us.
My friends, we have reached the zenith of Magic content. We are once again in spoiler season, my friends. We did it.
Da-da-da.
We got there. So, Lost Caves of Ixalan. We had the preview stream. We saw some cards. We're here to talk about them. And I mean, like, what's Lost Caves of Ixalan all about? Like, this originally was not themed Ixalan, right? They just like, we're going to do like this underground thing. And then they were like, we'll skin it as Ixalan. That's what I heard.
It makes perfect sense to me. Jungle, theme, fun, or exploration, and then make it about lost caves under the world. I think it's kind of like a Hollow World theme, you know, like the idea of like going into a underground and there's like a hidden other world inside of the world kind of vibe.
That terrifies me.
Yeah.
Spelunking.
Yeah, that's where the lizard people that actually control our lives live in the Hollow World here.
So we got also the new mechanics that I think are pretty cool. We got some cards that feature those mechanics. So let's dive into the one that I'm really interested to see if it's broken or not, depending on some costs, and that is Craft. So Craft is like our dual-faced card, you know, kind of thing. And what it lets you do is transform a card using an ability on the first cast side. And I think the theme is what? Like, you're sort of building on the card that you cast through the additional ability on the card. And it lets you exile cards of some kind and then also pay a mana cost to do this.
Yeah, and the thing to note here is that these are cards that you control or are in your graveyard. So if there is a cost that takes a card here, that's what it is. It's either one.
This is better than Delve, David.
No. No. In fact, I think that's the only thing that makes this ability even close to playable is the fact that you can take advantage of your graveyard as well. Yeah. Because, for example, the card that we have here is called the Enigma Jewel, and it costs a single blue. It's a legendary artifact.
Perfect.
The Enigma Jewel enters the battlefield tapped. It has a tap ability that says add generic, spend this mana only to activate abilities, which we've seen a couple of rocks that are kind of like this and creatures that are like this. Omen Hawk is a card that's kind of like this.
So it's Soul Ring.
It's Soul Ring, but better. It's got more text. And then it says craft with 4 or more non-lands with activated abilities for 8 generic and a blue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then the backside of the card is Locus of Enlightenment has each activated ability of the exiled cards used to craft it. You may activate each of those abilities only once each turn. And then it says whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. So here's what this is.
Hold on, Dave.
What?
Did the front say you have to craft with cards that have activated abilities?
That's
not
correct.
Just any cards, and pay 8 in a blue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
ambitious.
One quick thing here. So it's 8 in a blue, but it's actually 6 in a blue because you can use the 2 mana for itself because it says use it to activate abilities. And also it doesn't specify non-token and it says activated abilities. So you can actually do this with clues and foods and treasures, I think.
I don't think. Oh no, you can't. Oh yeah. You can pay for it with itself. But you cannot exile it to itself. Okay, because you have to exile that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but you can pay for it with foods and clues, which is something that I hadn't considered when I was looking at this. Obviously, those don't go to your graveyard. But now that you've brought those into the party, Devon, honestly, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, you can pay for it with treasures if you're not tapping the treasures to pay for the cost as well.
That too.
So, I mean, this card looks expensive and clunky. Like, I'm sure that someone's going to try to do something with this particular thing, but it's got a Panharmonicon attached to the back of it. It kind of becomes what's essentially like a Staff of Domination. It's like a single artifact with a bunch of activated abilities on it. You might not want it to be clues and food tokens because the abilities you get are sacrifice it.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's probably something else in here, but I like where your head was going, where it's like, hey, can we use tokens to do this? Can we do stuff like that? There's probably something here for somebody who's playing EDH, is my mind with this particular card.
My thing would be, like, if you can find a way, if there's an ability that says tap, deal a point of damage, and then, like, some amount of mana to untap it, you can, like, turn it into a machine kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Could be. I think that this card is... I would be surprised if this shows up in formats that we particularly care about. I do think that there's a chance that this mechanic, of course, could be something interesting. And so we just wanted to start off with this one. It's an interesting thing. Yeah. There's probably ones that are like craft with an artifact or something like that, where it only costs 1 card to do it. And maybe that's cheaper and less impactful, but more reasonable to actually do. But interesting ability. We haven't seen anything quite like this before.
Man, this next mechanic looks familiar.
It does. So the next mechanic that we heard about via this is a mechanic called Discover. And tell me if this sounds familiar to you, Devon. Discover means exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value X or less. Cast it without paying its mana cost or put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order.
Well, then.
These are all, they have a number. So it's like Discover 3. The card that we're looking at right now is called Geological Appraiser. It's a 4 mana 3/2 that has Discover 3 on it when it enters the battlefield. And yeah, this to me looks like Cascade.
Okay, so this is Cascade, but they separated the mana values of the two cards, right?
Yes.
So like the card that discovers could cost anything, and then the discovered number can be anything. So it's not just like you cast the 3 mana Cascader and anything 2 or less gets cast. They could sort of separate it.
Right.
But everything else is the same?
Other than the fact that you can put it in your hand
Oh,
if it
yes, that,
whiffs,
yeah.
which you can't do with Cascade. If you hit something and can't cast it, it just goes away, right?
I missed that part.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of possible scenarios I see here. So first off, by my reading of these rules, Footfalls and Living End and things that like that can be cast with this. It is a non-land card with mana value X or less in every case. So scenarios that I could see working out here that I don't think will work out, but are possible is like, yeah, there could be a card that says Discover 1 on it that we want to play for some reason. And then who knows what happens? Nope. Yeah, there could be another redundant thing that's reasonable that is a 2 or less, is one that has Discover 2. Like I really don't think it's going to happen, but right?
Surely the people designing these sets would test these in the modern formats before, printing the standard cards. It's maybe something like perhaps a 2-mana enchantment that works very well with some of the other cards that are in modern. You think they probably would test these cards first, right?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly think they can test it. I also think sometimes they just don't care, Devon. And they're like, hey, we're going to make a sweet card that has Discover 1 and we know what you're going to try to do with it. And let's see if it's worth it. Now, who knows? But
can you imagine Rhinos on turn 1 or even turn 2,
Oh, casting a spell?
Yeah, like a Discover spell, you know what I mean?
Yes. So my take on that was more like, what if it's a 3-drop that has Discover 1 and Rhinos decide suddenly, or there's 2 of them that have Discover 2 and all of a sudden, or Discover 1 and Rhino suddenly goes, oh, I get to play 2 drops now.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating.
Like that's the more of the way that my brain went.
Oh, okay.
Was like, maybe we suddenly have a less constrained deck list of the suspend cards that we're so familiar with in modern because of a couple of these things.
So you're thinking like 3 mana 2/2, but if because it has Discover 1, you can actually play like real 2 mana cards in it. Gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
That would be the more like earth shattering thing that would happen, I think.
Yeah, that would be wild.
I doubt it, but who knows? All right. So interesting mechanic. Lots of potential to be broken, I think, that particular one. The next one is a series of related mechanics that are called Descended or Descend. Now, I'm going to start with Descended. So Descended is my favorite metal band, but also what it means is it is like a trigger that has happened to a player. So it's like you have descended if a permanent has gone to your graveyard from anywhere this turn. And so this... It's kind of a revolt style card. Yeah, exactly. So if you have had a permanent, but it can go from your deck, so it's not revolt in that sense, right?
Okay.
So it's like if you mill, it counts, that kind of stuff. So this adds abilities to cards, it activates things, yada yada yada, all that kind of stuff. I haven't seen anything there yet, but the real note that I want to make here is that in order to have descended, it has to be a permanent. It does not count instants or sorceries on this kind of thing. So if you opt, you have not descended, for example. So here's a card that goes with Descended. It's called the Mycotyrant. It is a generic, a black and a green, and it has a star. It is a legendary creature, Elder Fungus. It's a mythic. It has trample, and it says the Mycotyrant's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control that are fungi and or saplings. And at the beginning of your end step, create X 1/1 black fungus creature tokens with this creature can attack, where X is the number of times you descended this turn.
This creature can't block, not can attack. But when I saw this card, I immediately thought of Devon. This feels like a Devon card to me. I feel like I've seen you play sacrifice decks. I feel like this is sort of like the kind of card that you would want to put into a sack deck, but it would not be exactly what you want it to be. It's like a delayed Mayhem Devil, where it's like, it's not picking them now, but you just get a lot of creatures later.
Yeah, I mean, I typically do love cards like this because it, again, every time I see a card like this that has, when something dies, I always think of, cat oven and things like that, which it's pretty powerful with. But the problem is the tokens can't block. So it's, if you're making a giant horde of stuff, it's hard. You can't really play defense with them. You can make some, big giant trampling guy, which is kind of cool. But I think the issue is the tokens can't block. One thing I'd be curious is like, what are the other fungi and saprolings that are playable alongside it? Can they just make like a, kind of like a theme deck, as it were?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. This is the most powerful. There's a couple of other descended cards I think that they showed that are like much more run of the mill kind of triggers, like more like limited kind of fodder stuff. But this one is the one that was kind of interesting to me just because it's like, oh, it's a big effect and it stacks. Descended can stack. It's not just one thing. You can descend multiple times in a turn. So it's something else to keep an eye out for is like, okay, goes great with sacrifice, maybe not, but that's certainly what came to mind when I took a look at this card at first.
I'm curious if, so it says the number of times you descended this turn. Like, let's say you have 5 creatures in play and you cast a Wrath. Do you think that would count once or 5 times? I would assume
I'm pretty
once,
sure
right?
It's one.
Yeah. Okay.
It's each time, but but it's
instance.
great for sacrifice, right? Because you're doing it, with individual things, and so those game actions are all different from each other. So the related mechanic to this, descend 4 or descend 8, I think are the two numbers that they're actually showing here. It's basically threshold. Anybody remember threshold?
Oh, I sure do.
I do not.
So Threshold is a mechanic we have not seen in a long, long time. Almost all of the cards that had Threshold were an Odyssey block. And what this said was you get to do extra stuff if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. That's what Threshold was. 7 or more cards in your graveyard. And it was kind of broken in the constructed at that time. I think if I remember, there were many decks that kind of took advantage of that in different ways. What was that? What do you think was, do you remember the iconic card? It's Werebear.
Yeah.
Is the iconic card, right? That was like a tapped for mana or became a 3/3, right?
Yeah, it was just like I think it was 4/4. So it was like a 2-mana 1/1 green mana dork and then a get +3/+3.
There you go. Yep.
But I think for the most part, as far as just the mechanic is concerned, I think they mostly replaced that with Delirium. They kind of figured that Delirium was a better way to do that than Threshold.
Yeah. And so the last card that was printed with Threshold that I could find was in Modern Horizons 1. It is not a notable card. I didn't even write down its name. But basically, the one thing I wanted to point out again at this, as we're looking at this card and thinking about this mechanic, is that it has to be permanence. It is not instants or sorceries. So a lot of what happened with self-mill decks or things like that is like they mill themselves and you get a bunch of sorceries that would have milled you in the deck. Like this was part of the blue-green decks that were floating around back in the day when Threshold was actually good. This is just permanents that are in your graveyard. So it's I think it's much worse. It's kind of like the opposite of the City's Blessing. I haven't seen any cards that are really paying this off well right now. There's a couple that they showed. There's like a common that has flying if you have Descend 4, and there's kind of like this creature that can be cast from your graveyard if you have Descend 8. But I haven't seen anything yet, but it's interesting because Threshold was good. There are decks that like to fill their graveyards, and so there could be a payoff for some kind of thing here with Descend in the future.
Yeah, especially with like just the even just the cat oven interaction. Like you can go cat oven, do that a couple of times, deadly dispute to get a bunch of balls, to get the ball rolling a couple of times on that. So depending on how good the rares are, there definitely is a world where this could be really, really constructed playable.
And then last mechanic I wanted to talk about. We've been wondering for a while since we saw the original cards what a map token was. And we now know what a map token is. And that is an artifact that says, pay a colorless, sack this token, explore. That's what it is. Guys, remember explore?
Of course.
This is the Dora the Explorer UB.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So some individual cards that were interesting.
Yes, we have some cards.
Anybody have any thoughts of things that they saw on the list or anything they want to talk about, or you guys want to go through kind of the order that I had laid out?
Can we talk about the card that I was most like, this seems cool, and I think like maybe has some play, but I'm not smart enough to know where yet. And that's Saheeli, the Sun's Brilliance, which is a blue and a red. Is it mana for a 2/2 legendary human artificer creature? And Saheeli's activated ability: you pay blue and a red. You tap her, you create a token that's a copy of another target creature or artifact you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Correct me if I'm wrong, is that the Saheeli Planeswalker ability? Like
Yep.
the minus?
It's close to, yes.
I think it might be the exact same text.
I think it is. But I think there are some interesting options here. I'm like, I'm not creative enough or a brewer enough to like be like, okay, there's some strategy that could also generate mana and like untap Saheeli. Like, I'm almost afraid that it's going to be like a value card that's disguised as like a combo card, but there's something probably here. But I could be wrong. Could just be nothing. It is mythic.
And I was telling Dave this earlier. I actually didn't look at any of these cards because I wanted to get like a first impression for the listeners at home. So, I mean, I like this card a lot. I think it's really cool. Maybe you could do something. So what I initially think of is like Jeskai Ascendancy. So you can untap it over and over again, where you can like copy something, play a spell, untap it, yada, yada, go from there.
You go.
So, I mean, 2-mana 2/2 is kind of tough, though. Maybe it's good for like standard level play, but I don't know if it's going to see a ton of play outside of that.
Here's the thing that kills it for me is that it has an activated ability, or it has a mana cost associated with its activated ability. Like
You have to get that mana back and untap it.
That's the brick that I think is just too big to overcome for this card, because to me it feels like Vannifar. Like when I look at this, I'm like, okay, we're gonna do some Vannifar stuff, but like it just is. I would rather have Vannifar, because Vannifar doesn't cost anything to do what it's doing. You know what I mean? So if there's some kind of chain or some kind of interesting thing that you can do with Saheeli's activated ability, Vannifar is probably going to be easier.
I will say, thank cloth this thing does not have no mana to activate, because we'd have a kind of a red flag if it did. It'd be a little too good, I think.
We would have a bunch of Splinter Twin situations
Yes.
immediately happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you about a card that is kind of boring, but I'm curious what Devon thinks about it? It's a very simple card.
Sure.
It's called Spyglass Siren, and it is a 1/1 for a blue with flying. It's a flying man, but it's actually a Siren pirate, and it creates a map token when it comes into play, and that is what it does.
I looked this up, and I think if I did my search right, this is the first flying man in 30 years that makes an additional piece of cardboard when it ETBs.
That's funny.
Yeah. No, you don't usually see like flying bodies that replace themselves with one. I actually like this. I'm a big game objects type of guy. I really enjoy like food and stuff, just making a lot of game objects. And anytime I could spend 1 mana for a 1/1 that has some ability that also makes another thing, I'm into it. I don't know what I can do with it, but I'm in for it.
Yeah. To me, what I immediately thought of was just the Convoke deck that you spent some time playing, in Pioneer a couple months ago. Obviously, that deck already does have two 1 CMC cards that come into play and make an artifact, in the Red Guy and Thraben Inspector, basically. But I also was kind of like, what if this goes with like Ensoul Artifact or something weird like that? Like, it's just kind of like, I'm going to play a creature, make a token, and make an Ensoul Artifact, and then I have other things going on with it. It felt like kind of a no-brainer to me as something to consider.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if the Ensoul Artifact deck really has any sort of 1 mana. I guess they can, if they're blue-white, they can play Thraben Inspector, but yeah, I mean, 1 mana for a 1/1 flyer. The thing about Ensoul is like you want something to be able to do with the actual body itself, because you can utilize the artifact in good ways. It's just the question of how you're utilizing the body. But I mean, I love game objects. I'm into this sort of thing. This is exactly my stuff.
Perfect. Seems like a good common.
I'll mess
Shane,
with it.
is anything else catch your eye?
Yeah, the Jadelight Spelunker was something that I looked at, and then the longer I look at it, the less I'm happy with it, because, Jadelight Ranger was a surprisingly pretty quality card for a surprisingly long time, in my opinion. Like, I think it saw standard play. I think it was like in Pioneer early on.
Yeah.
In some decks, right? And so what Jadelight Spelunker is a X and a green, 1/1 Merfolk creature scout, and when it ETBs, it explores X time. And I don't think we actually reminded people what exploring is. It makes sense. It's like you look at the top card of your library, you reveal it actually. You can put it into your hand. No, you do put it into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, you put a 1/1 counter on that creature that's exploring, and then you can either put the card back or put it into your graveyard. So it's kind of like a surveil with upside type thing, right? Where it's like, hey, I get to choose what I do with this card. If you explore 5 times and you hit a non-land card off the top, you can just be like, okay, 5 counters, goes on Jadelight Spelunker. But then I'm kind of like, well, like what's our ceiling here? It's like what, like a 4-mana 4/4 that surveilled 3, maybe? You know what I mean? Like, or like a 3-mana 1/1 that drew you 2 lands. And I'm like, I don't know.
Shane, I got 2 words for you. Hardened Scales.
Oh,
Okay.
For Pioneer. I've been messing around with a lot of Pioneer Hardened Scale shells, and the nice thing about this, it unfortunate that it doesn't trigger scales if you just play it as a 1-mana 1/1, but it's nice that it's like, for lack of a better term, it scales like throughout the game. You know what I mean?
Scales and scales.
Yeah. So it's like it just fills a spot in the curve, whatever you're missing, and if you can get multiple counters on it, I could see it being good. I don't think I would consider it in boats, because boats doesn't really. I guess you can like play this on turn 2 if your elf dies to explore, but it's like 2 mana for a 2/2. It's like kind of eh. But yeah, I could see it in scales.
That's cool. I didn't think about that.
I do like
option.
it. It's kind of cool.
I like the surveilling aspect of it, where it's like you get a little card selection, you get a little growth on your creature. You get some land draws if you want. You want to ramp out a little bit, or you need to hit those land drops. You sort of peel through the deck, where it's like, yeah, I drew 2 lands, but then I don't have 2 lands to draw for my next, couple draws there. So
Yeah. Speaking of Pioneer, a card that I liked, I thought was interesting is Abuelo Ancestral Echo, which is a generic, a white and a blue.
Abuelo is just grandpa, right?
I don't know.
Abuelo,
Like
I think it is.
Yeah, like Abuela, his grandma.
I think it is.
So it's a 2/2 legendary creature spirit with flying and ward 2. And then it has an activated ability that is a generic, a white, and a blue. Exile another target creature or artifact you control. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So when I first looked at this, I was like, is this a Soul Herder type card for Pioneer? But then I started looking at it more, and I just kind of was like, is this just okay to play in your spirits deck to like re-trigger your rattle chains and do other stuff with later in the game? And once you can cast this with flash, it kind of gets a lot better because it has ward 2. I don't know, it's tough because it doesn't make creatures better, it doesn't interact right away, so it makes me wonder a little bit if it's like, hey, this is like a one of that you would consider playing in the deck to do some mana sinking basically. But I don't know.
In 2023 Magic, this feels like an uncommon to me, and it's a rare. And I'm kind of like, why? Like, everything just seems a little bit too expensive. Like, maybe not the card itself, but we've seen like 3-mana Spirit Lords, you know what I mean, that would give like all your other cards ward or something like that, right? And like the activated ability being like 1 white blue
Expensive,
just seems like
yeah.
seems
So
a little
expensive.
expensive. And I'm like, why? Like, why are they costing it like this? And maybe it's like the limited environment, like they can't afford to have this like be too powerful there. I don't know.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about. David mentioned like the rattle chains interaction, which I hadn't thought about at first. But the big issue is that wait till next end step. If this just like flickered it and immediately came back, I'd like it a lot more, because you could you could even do some shenanigans with Spell Queller, which I guess you still can. If you get the 6 mana, you can go the way that Spell Queller is worded. You can go Spell Queller, trigger on the stack, exile it, because it has it's worded the old way where it has
It's
the
the
2
Fiend
separate
Hunter's
triggers.
way.
Yeah, exactly. So you can do something cool with that, but it's just like, I don't know. It's really expensive. I don't think you want to play this in spirits.
Yeah.
It's close.
All right. Close.
I do like the Planeswalker. I mean,
We like the Planeswalker.
I like the Planeswalker because it's like, I think it's a very good 5-mana Planeswalker.
Quintorius.
Who wants to read it? Somebody read it.
Okay, Quintorius Kand, 3 red white for a legendary Quintorius. Whenever you cast a spell, so static text, whenever you cast a spell from exile, Quintorius deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. The plus, it comes down with 4 loyalty. The +1 loyalty is create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. -3 is discover 4, which is the cascade ability. So anything 4 or less mana value can be cast for free or put into your hand. Then the -6, which can be, 3 turns. Exile any number of target cards from your graveyard. Add red for each card exiled this way. You may play those cards this turn. I mean, this is a 5-mana walker. It pluses and like creates a good body. 3/2 red and white spirit creature token is sweet. It does not fly. That'd be pretty darn good. And then the Discover is just card advantage, sort of. I mean, you either can put it in your hand or you cast it. That's pretty good. Like you're getting the card and you're casting it for free, which is nice.
I might be going a little too deep on this one, but
Please
if you
do.
go okay, so let's say you have some random game objects in play and you go Beseech the Mirror, sacrifice an artifact, get another copy of Beseech the Mirror to trigger the static ability of this, and you could just loop through all 4 Beseeches to drain them for 6.
And
then
Six.
I don't know you do after that, but right now, hear me out. You have 4 Beseeches in your graveyard, and then you tick this thing up to 6, and then you can -6 to recast all 4 Beseeches. And then go again. This is the kind of the things that come into my brain, but
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you're doing with this card in Pioneer right now. In Modern, I'm completely clueless, but I think this is like a fun 5-mana walker.
yeah, I think that if you the best thing you can probably do with this is build around the Discover. Like, it seems like Discover is probably the most powerful ability, since that, like, the common play pattern is you play this, hit a powerful thing off Discover, and then drain them for 2 because you're getting a little bit of an extra value. So if you can build some kind of, like, Cascade deck that can use that Discover 4, and I'm assuming it's very similar. I'm assuming it works the same with Cascade. It's like if I hit a Valky, we're not going to have a Valky situation on our hands again, right? I don't think so.
I don't think so. I couldn't tell from the rule. Like, I'm not.
Surely they learned their lesson the first time on that, right?
Cast it without paying its mana cost or put it into your hand. I think it does, Devon.
No, there's no way. They had to have. There's no possible. I refuse to believe, Dave, that they would make this mistake twice. And if they did, and I'm wrong, they better instantly do something. I don't know. But we'll see what happens.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna play Quintorius and Valky, is what you're saying, and then we're just gonna discover into Valky.
I'm gonna play the Bloodbraid Elf, the one that we saw earlier. I'm gonna play that thing. It costs less mana.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no way. There's just, I refuse to believe that. There's no way. Not happening.
We're gonna find out.
Once he get at us, we got to figure it out.
We'll find out soon because the set is coming out in a few weeks. All right, so I think that was it, pretty much from the stream.
Yeah, when does spoiler season actually begin here?
This is the beginning.
Is this the beginning of it?
Season, yeah. So next week, I think we'll have a lot more cards to look at.
Oh man, I love it. I love a good spoiler season. So, and this is a fun start. I think what I like about this is there's a lot of things to tune, right? Like we have the tunability of exploring. If exploring's, I think I must be back here. We have the Discover tunability. I think that seems cool. If there's this weird like signpost rare of Abuelo, like if there's an exile theme going on, like in the Azorius colors, that could be cool. So I'm all about it. Like I think that the theming of the set seems good and the core mechanics seem good. So let's just hope that there's some efficiently costed cards for us to mess with here. Oh, I guess also the tunability of the crafting. Yeah. So there we go. Cool. My friends, let's get out of here. That wraps up the show. If you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe to the podcast on your podcast app of choice. You get those latest episodes as soon as they come out. Make sure you don't miss anything. If you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and a review. Engage with us on Spotify. We know we have some regulars already. It's a fun way for us to kind of do like a little poll every week, or for you to tell us what you're thinking about the episodes. If you want to submit a question to the pod or reach out, you can tweet us at the Dive Down, all one word. Give us an email at thedivedown@gmail.com. If you want to support us, we definitely appreciate that. You can go to the Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown, or check out the store at thedivedown.com/store. Sponsor time, heavyplay.com. You get the incredible deck, dice, boxes, play mats using the EquipMag system. Using code TheDiveDown2023 gives you 10% off your first order there. Mana Traders, of course, longtime affiliate of us. You can use promo code TheDiveDown23 for 10% off of your first 2 months for Rending Magic online cards there. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. But until next week, get out there and explore some bees.